In this lecture, we're going to review some Design Like a Pro tips. Now, why this might be beneficial to you is because as you're just starting out with utilizing the Wix platform, you might not understand how to have the best eye for design. So with that in mind, these pointers are going to help you create a website within Wix, but also to where it looks professional. The first thing that we're going to review is font and color continuity. And what I mean by this is having consistency within your font as well as with the colors that you use for those fonts. On this page, notice I have consistency with using darker gray, yellow, and white. Also notice how I have pretty much the same types of font. Right here, it's DIN Next Light. I also have DIN Next Light here. And the same thing in this section. And then also in the remainder of the bottom of this page. I also pretty much have the same font across all of my other pages. Now, I'm going to show you another page that's the exact same as this, but things are just a little different. This is the same exact layout, but notice how things are a tad bit off. Right here to begin, I have different types of font, they're differently sized, and I'm using colors that aren't consistent. Remember my colors were darker gray, yellow, and white. Here I have light blue and red. Also in this section, it looks a little bit off. Notice how I'm using different types of font in the title and in the paragraph. Also here, I have different types of font with different colors and they're not sized correctly. These two columns look great, but this one is not necessarily lined up. So for best practices, I'd want to have my second column the same as my first and my third. And then scrolling down a bit more, this is a tad bit off as well. It's bold, it's green, and it doesn't go with my theme of darker gray, yellow, and white. So that's the first tip, having some consistency with the fonts that you use and the colors that you choose on your website. The next tip is to have your elements properly spaced. Now what I mean by this is as you put together your website, it's very common that you have certain things that are overlapping or you have too much space in between certain elements. On this page, things are spaced properly. You can see under the slider, there's a good amount of space. Then in this section, there's a good amount of space before you get to the columns. And then beneath the columns, there's a good amount of space before you get to the picture, and then this paragraph. And then right before the footer, there's a good amount of space as well. Now, an example of the same exact layout where things are not spaced correctly is here. Right here on this page, you can see how the top line of text is a little bit too close to the one beneath it. Another example is right here. You can see how everything is pretty much close together. You would want to space that out. As I'm scrolling down, you can see how there's a little bit too much space here because the columns are too far away from the buttons. And then scrolling down a bit more, you can see how the paragraph is not next to the photo that it might be describing. And then scrolling down a tad bit more, there's too much space here above the footer. I would want to eliminate this space and give myself just a little bit of space above the footer. There would be no need to have this blank space here unless I was going to add something else. The next tip is text and image balancing. And what this is having a good combination of text and images on the page so things flow correctly. Let me show you an example. This right here is the services page. And what you see at the top is the services title, a little bit of information maybe about the services, and then you give a user the opportunity, if they want to learn more, to click on service 1, 2, or 3. Therefore, you don't have all of the information listed for each service on the one page. That could be a little bit too much for a user if, let's say, they're only interested in one service. This way, it gives them the opportunity to click on what they want. Also notice that I do have a photo and then I have a paragraph. Overall, this page is quite balanced. You have a little bit of the intro, you have your columns and buttons, you have an image and text, and it's properly spaced. Now, an example of the same exact thing would be this Services 2 page. So, what you see here is only one title. Then you see two columns with no separate titles, so you don't know what they're about, and then you have a lot more text. This could be overwhelming for the user, especially when they're just trying to read what it is that they're looking for. Having something just like I showed right here on this page would be a little bit more appropriate, because then if a user wanted to read something specifically, they could click on the button, or if there were a particular title, they would at least know what it is that they're reading about. The next tip is quality image selection. Now, if you use pretty much any Wix image that's already in the Wix database, you typically just don't have to worry about there being a quality issue with that image. But if you are uploading your own images, there might be a quality issue if the image isn't high enough resolution and the dimensions aren't necessarily big as they need to be, especially for backgrounds and things of that purpose. Let me show you how you can tell what dimensions that you have for your photo. Image 1, for example, I'll right-click on it and I can click on Properties. And then I can go to Details and I can see that these dimensions show it's 268 by 185, which is very small. You can guarantee that if anything in the dimension says at least 1000 or 700 and or upwards, that the image is going to be a little bit bigger and it can look good in bigger spaces or small spaces. This image in particular would not look good as a background because it's so small, so when it's zoomed in, it's going to be very, very blurry. Now, this image being the same one, I click on Properties again, I click on Details, and for this one, it's about 1125 by 750. So this is a lot bigger, so it's going to look great in a larger space, and then it's also going to look great in a smaller space. And what I'm going to do is show you the comparison of both of these. So I'm going to upload both of these images into my Wix website, Image 1 and Image 2. Image 1 is smaller than Image 2. So this is Image 1 that's selected here, and I'm going to go ahead and add that to the website first. So I add to page. It's quite small. So if I go in and I add an image, clicking on Image 2, it's going to be a lot bigger. So let me show you the differences between these two and what happens. So right here, this box is an average size for an image. I'm going to upload Image 1, which is a smaller image. Notice how I swapped out the image and notice how blurry this image is. That's because the image is not a good enough resolution and it's too small. But if I go and I click on Image 2, which is a lot better quality and it's bigger, it's going to be just fine. And as you can see, the quality has gotten better because I have an image with a better resolution. Let me show you this example again, especially for this area here. A strip background is quite common, so I'll click on that, and I'm going to change the background, and I'm first going to put in Image 1. This is a lower quality image, so notice that I'm going to go ahead and take that off to where it's not tiled, but it shows the scale to fill. Notice how it's extremely blurry. So if I go here and I put in Image 2, notice how it isn't blurry anymore. And that's because the image was big enough and the resolution is good. When you select high quality images with a good resolution, it looks good in a big space, it looks good in a medium sized space, and it can also look good in a smaller space. This is why you really want to select quality images, because therefore they're going to be versatile anywhere you put them on the website. And the last tip is making sure that you have an all-inclusive header. And what I mean by that is you want to make sure you have enough content in your header. At the minimum, you should have a logo as well as a menu. Now, I would say for just an additional thing to add in, it might be to have a contact source up here, such as a phone number or an email. You maybe can add a button to go somewhere external or internal, like a page, and then social media as well. Social media is very, very common in the header, so of course, please make sure that you're being conscientious of including it here if you do have social media pages. Now, another thing to add in the header would be, let's say if you have a shopping cart for your store, maybe if you have booking on your site, you could make this button a Book Now button, and then anything else that you might find beneficial to the user to basically see across all pages, you want to include this here. Now, notice if I take away the menu, and let's say if I take away the Call Now and social media that I really don't have exactly what I need. That's why you always want to make sure you have pretty much everything a user needs to transition from page to page and to contact you somewhere in the header. The same thing is also applied to the footer. On the footer, this is also going to show across all pages, so you want to include some information here. A good thing to include would be an email address or a phone number, and then maybe social media. You don't have to include as much, just a little bit of what you had in the header, so at least if a user's at the bottom of your page, they still have a way of following up with you.